posting and notification in press in accordance with Wisconsin 19.84. Notice is hereby given that school board members who are not members of this committee may attend this meeting so as to constitute a quorum of the Board of Education. Any such board member attendance will be for information gathering only and will not result in direct decision making by the Board of Education at the committee meeting. I am going to read the safety message next. So let me pull that up. I think March, this is around the time of year where we talk about the changing of the time, right, with this weekend. And so I know Commissioner Murray always says this is a good time to talk about checking your smoke alarm, so I have a message about that. 3 out of every 5 home fire deaths happen in homes with no smoke alarms, according to the National Fire Protection Association. Test your smoke alarms every month and replace the battery at least once a year. I know Commissioner Murray suggests doing it during the time change twice a year, and I think it's a good time because it happens every year. If the alarm makes a chirping sound, replace the battery immediately. Smoke alarms should be in every bedroom and in the common areas on each floor of a home. Mount them at least 10 feet from the stove to reduce false alarms, less than 12 inches from the ceiling and away from windows, doors, and ducts. Smoke alarms can be interconnected wirelessly. Obviously, that's more so with new construction than installing into an older home. That means when one sounds, they all sound. A Consumer Product Safety Commission survey found this is the best way to notify everyone in a home that there is a fire. And then also something about carbon monoxide detectors. Anything that burns fuel can potentially become a source of carbon monoxide, an invisible, odorless gas that can kill. Carbon monoxide alarms should be installed in a central location outside each bedroom on every level of the home. Safety tips for CO detectors mirror those of smoke alarms. Change the batteries, test them, and interconnect them if possible, and make sure vents for your gas appliances, fireplace, dryer, stove, and furnace are free and clear of snow or debris. And I know that my dryer thing outside needs to be cleaned because I noticed that, and so I need to get done with that. And also, I think many of us recognize that fire, smoke alarms, and carbon monoxide detectors can come in like a dual alarm, so you don't have to have 2 separate. So they are more expensive that way, but it does, I think, it's a good peace of mind. So that is the safety message for the month of March, and happy March to everyone. We are just newly into March. I need a motion to adopt the March 2nd, 2026 agenda as presented.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Motion passes unanimously. So now we are moving on to the iReady and Mastery Prep presentation by Dr. Allison DeGraff. I can't wait. And I am not sarcastic. I am very sincere. I'm looking forward to this. Thanks.
All right. So good afternoon. Today I'm here to share with you an update on our mid-year data. So in December and January, students in grades K through 11 completed mid-year assessments in reading and math. So a little bit about what we'll talk about today. So I just want to review our district goals to just remind us what we're measuring overall as a district and how that mid-year data kind of tells us how we're doing in progress towards those goals. We'll talk about the K-8 iReady mid-year data, how did we do in reading and math, and then at the high school level in Mastery Prep with their mid-year data in reading, English, and math as well, and a snapshot of our attendance data. And then as we talk about areas of strength and growth, we want to talk about what are those next steps to address those in the district. So a little bit about what is iReady. So iReady is a reading and math diagnostic assessment that we take 3 times a year in the fall, the winter, and spring. The fall is really that baseline data. iReady, this is the first year we've taken this assessment. You know, you may be familiar with STAR that we've taken probably over the last 10 years. What we were finding though is that STAR was not providing us data that we felt aligned well with a forward exam. So we had an opportunity to talk with CISA, DPI, some other districts, and get some feedback. iReady seems to be a tool that's widely used across the state, and it's much more aligned to the state standards that are assessed on the forward exam. So this test is used as a screening tool, kind of a dipstick at the beginning, middle, and end of the year on how are we doing and are we progressing in the right direction towards our goals. It helps us identify those skill gaps, and it really provides more actionable data to help us inform in classroom instruction. iReady is computer adaptive, so when a student takes the assessment, the more questions they answer correctly, the harder the questions become. The more challenging they have in challenges they have in responding to the question, the easier they become in order to find their exact level of proficiency. So as we start to look at our data, just to remind you of our priority area of student excellence. And again, what our district goal measures is we want to see a 2% increase in ELA and math on the forward exam for students in grades 3 through 8. And our goal at the high school level is to see a 2% increase in our cohort growth. And we'll talk a little bit more about that cohort growth as well. And then increase in our attendance rate, so we continue to close that gap between our district and state averages for attendance rates. So this first, quadrant that you're going to see is from iReady, and specifically in reading. So we are going to talk about how did we do on our proficiency in iReady, but we know that on the state exam we measure growth as well. So this chart shows us these 4 quadrants, how we're doing in relationship to growth at every grade level. So there's 4 quadrants. You want to be in the top 2 quadrants. The top 2 quadrants are, I have lower performance but high growth. And if we're going to close gaps and get closer to proficiency, we have to be in low performance but high growth. The right-hand quadrant is, as I'm facing it, high proficiency, high growth. So even if we're proficient or we're a student who excels in school, we still want them to grow every day. So the bottom 2 quadrants are where we want to avoid or more concerns that we need to address, which is low performance, low growth in the bottom left. And the bottom right is high performance, but I'm seeing lower growth. So it's very positive to see that we are in the top 2 quadrants. We can see that 7th grade is one of our lower in ELA, so that provides us some information on how that grade level is performing in relationship to reading. Also, we know that grades 4, 5, and 6, 7, and 8 are grades that are tested on forward for growth. So to see it, all but 7th grade are in that highest area of growth. So this same, this is reading, the same chart here is for math. So you can see we're still in the top 2 quadrants, but 7th grade again has dropped a little bit even lower in math in that bottom left quadrant. So again, something we'll talk about with next steps and how we are looking at addressing that as well. Again, iReady is given nationally, and so last Thursday we had a team fly in they came in from Colorado from iReady and met with all of our K-8 principals and their instructional coaches. Talk to them about what are the most essential reports to use, how do we look at our data from the building level lens to identify where those gaps are at grade levels and in classroom levels. And they did say that nationally the trend is there's going to be higher growth in reading overall, so to see us a little bit higher in the quadrant in reading and a little bit lower, still want to be in those top 2 quadrants in math is somewhat of a trend nationally too. So of course we do want to keep moving forward, but it is positive that we're in those top 2 quadrants again. So as we move into our iReady data, just one thing to note is that, as I mentioned, iReady is a new assessment this year. So typically we have historical data. So we can say, how do we do from last winter to this winter? So we don't have historical data. So we'll look at how did we do fall to spring, and we'll look at each grade level, and then we'll look at how did we compare to the state average in the winter and the national average. Another reason we chose to go with iReady is it's not a small sample size. Over 156,000 students take iReady just in the state of Wisconsin. So when we're comparing how we did in the winter to the state, that's a large group of students, and there's over 9 million students that take iReady nationally. So strong sample size to know how we're doing in comparison to the state and national averages. So as we look at this in reading, our K-8 proficiency at the district in the winter is 2% above the state and 4% above the national average in reading. When we break that down to how do we do in fall and winter, we see a 22% increase from fall to winter in K-5 reading. And from fall to winter with middle school math, we had a 9% increase. I'm sorry, reading, yes, thank you. No, you're right, sorry. My brain's getting ahead of myself. Thank you. So then when we break it down, how did we do K-5 in reading proficiency and 6-8 in comparison to just the state? We can see that we, at the elementary level, are stronger in comparison to the state than at the middle school level, so we still have some more gaps to close in that area as well. So let's break it down by grade level. So when we look at grade levels in reading in comparison to the district, state, and national, we have kindergarten that's slightly below in reading, but we have first grade, second grade, and then when you look at third, fourth, and fifth, we're above the state and national average in all of those grade levels. Third grade does mirror what we saw in the forward exam. We saw that our third grade made the strongest growth that they've made in probably the last 6 to 8 years. So we see that they're continuing to stay strong on this mid-year assessment as well. Kindergarten will be interesting to continue to look at just slightly below, but is that where the pacing of our curriculum is in relationship to others, because we seem to gain that back by third grade. So just something we want to continue to monitor. When we look at grades 6 through 8 in reading proficiency, in 6th grade, we've remained above the state and national average at the mid-year. But again, we saw 7th had lower growth when we looked at that quadrant, and so they are below that state and national average. And 8th grade is still slightly, but we did see that 8th grade is trending in closing gaps with growth. So we do start to see them increasing in their proficiency. So now as we move into the iReady math data, when we look at how did we do mid-year in comparison to the state and national average on students being assessed on the state standards, we are right at the state average for math in K-8. And then if we break that down and we look at how did we do K-5 against the state and 6-8, again, K-5 is about 4% above the state average, and we have that, still have that gap, gaining some proficiency in math. Again, 7th grade you'll see is an area to continue to focus on as we look at data by grade level. From fall to spring, elementary had a 23% growth of students who are proficient, so strong growth there. And then at middle school, we saw an 11% growth from fall to winter in math in the percentage of students proficient. When we break that down by grade level, we kind of saw a similar pattern with kindergarten, but then in first, in second grade, in third and fourth and fifth grade is right at the state average, but we saw that first through fifth grade were really at or above the state average, and again in third and fourth grade, looking like some really strong gains in proficiency, and a little more, we're looking at more like a 6 or 8% above the state and national averages. So a lot of strong proficiency at that elementary level. At the middle school level, 6th grade is close to that state average. But then again, we see that proficiency drop in 7th and 8th grade as well, and we saw that when we looked at that quadrant, especially with 7th grade with growth as well too. So as we look at Mastery Prep is an assessment that we use at the high school level for students in grades 9 through 11. It is given in the fall and winter. It's specifically aligned to the ACT standards, but again, it provides some of that actionable data that helps us inform instruction in relationship to the ACT standards that students are assessed on the ACT, and that's part of our state report card. It's again used to identify those gaps on those ACT skills. It's also used to help with test taking strategies. So when we first started taking Mastery Prep, our students would take one of the assessments in English, then one in math, and maybe one in science, but we wanted it to more mirror what the actual ACT is like. So now our students come for a half day. It helps them with test-taking strategies, time management, and organizational skills as well. So when they actually take the ACT, they have had more of that experience a couple of times. So what does our data to start with look like in Mastery Prep? So remember, again, our district goal is to increase our cohorts by 2% in the percentage of students meeting that college and career readiness benchmark. So when we look at how did we do mid-year, now with Mastery Prep, we do have historical data. So we've been using it for about 3 years. So we can look at how did we do last winter compared to this winter. So this indicates last winter in blue, how did our percentage of students meeting that college and career readiness benchmark at 9th, 10th, and 11th, and the percentage of students meeting that college and career readiness benchmark this winter. So we see some really strong proficiency increases from last year to this year. So then we want to look at that cohort, which is trying to, again, give us at mid-year a prediction of how might we do on ACT and how are those cohorts doing. So when we talk about the cohorts, we're saying, so if I look at the class of 28, that would be our current sophomores. So we're looking at, that data tells me how did our sophomores do when they were freshmen, and here's their sophomore score. Class of 27 is our juniors with their current, or with their last year's score as a sophomore. So again, this is the percentage of students meeting that college and career readiness benchmark. Also remember that the benchmark gets higher as they go from 9th to 10th and 10th to 11th. So it was more challenging to reach that benchmark as they increase in grade levels as well. So that's even more significant that they've made that growth. So both of our cohorts have significantly exceeded that 2% growth that we're looking at in both the 9th and 10th and 10th and 11th grade cohorts. And so I just wanted to show you a visual of, this is the actual pre-ACT that they took last year. Now these one class would be slightly different, but we met it in one cohort last year and not the other. And right now we're trending in both cohorts significantly achieving that goal. So when I look at English, again, we saw some really strong proficiency increases at the 9th, 10th, and 11th grade level. So really when I'm looking at reading and math, that's telling me that our kids are coming in with some really stronger skills than maybe we have in the past. And when you heard the presentation on Wisconsin Policy Forum, one of the things that they talked about is we're really seeing some gap closing from pre-COVID with elementary and high school, but not as much with middle school. And I would say as we're looking at this mid-year data, that's reflective of this as well. So it really aligns with what they talked about too. So then again, we see that in those two cohorts with our current 10th and our current 11th graders making more than a 2% increase in that cohort area. So now as we look at Mastery Prep at the high school level, and we look at math, that looks a little bit different for us. So when we look at the current 9th grade class from last winter to this winter, it's a different group of students, but we're not seeing as strong as proficiency. At 10th grade, we see an increase, and then at 11th grade, it's a little bit lower. Now, we also have to look at that as cohort, which is the next slide. So cohort-wise, our 9th to current 10th grade class has met that goal for their cohort. So you can see that although one group isn't coming in as strong as the other, that cohort's meeting their growth. The other cohort currently is reflecting that it's not trending in that direction too, slightly lower. And so when we look at what did that look like last year on the actual pre-ACT and ACT, we saw something similar. We saw one cohort meeting and one cohort didn't. And that's what we're seeing right now. So definitely we know where we need to continue to target and focus in continuing to increase the students proficient in math at the high school level as well. Just briefly want to touch on attendance as our third goal in our student excellence priority area. So I just did a snapshot. Kim Perenboom provides monthly data to all of our schools looking at where we're at the state district and then their individual building levels, so they're having an ongoing ability to monitor their attendance data and comparison to other schools as well. So we see from last January to this January, we have a 0.6 increase, so we've improved in the last year. We still haven't met the goal of getting to the state level. The state increased by 0.5, so we increased slightly more. So we're making progress. If you look back about 3 years ago in our attendance, we were at about 90%, so we're continuing to move in the right direction, but want to continue to put some of those measures in to improve attendance. So this is a visual of what's going to happen Thursday again. So Superintendent Holtzman and I will be out at Black Hawk Tech all day with all of our K through 12 school leaders and leadership teams, which includes teacher leaders as well too. We will spend the day digging further into this data and identifying, specifically, middle schools are going to be talking about 7th grade math and high schools are going to be talking about that cohort in math. What is our data telling us? What are some action steps we need to put in place from now until the end of the year, and then we'll be thinking about that next year as well too, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but they will be writing their last 100-day plan from March to the end of the year. So we're excited to give them more time in the data and really reflect on that and get feedback from teachers about what are some things that we need to think about as action steps and next steps that are manageable at the classroom level as well. So, as we kind of close the presentation too. So what are our next steps? Again, continuing to review that data. As I mentioned, we had the iReady team out here to specifically help our school leaders understand the data and continue to build their capacity around analyzing data and using that to make instructional decisions at a building level and classroom level. We also will spend time on Thursday, and they're continuing to monitor target groups. So we know our target groups is an area we made significant growth on in our report card this past year. So we're continuing to monitor those, who are those students. When I look at our target groups, I saw a lot of growth in reading within our target group for grades 4, 5, and 8. So again, that 7th grade. And then in math, really 4 and 5 had the most significant target group growth, and we want to see a little more from 7th and 8th. Again, we'll work on those next 100-day plans. We'll want to specifically target action steps within math. One of the key things that we have done, because we recognize that math is an area we continue to need to grow in, and specifically at middle school and some at high school as well. We worked with CISA this year. They came in this fall and did a math audit in grades 4 through 12. So they spent time in about 40 different classrooms at all 3 of those levels to give us feedback on what's working well, what are our strengths, what are our areas of growth. So CISA came and presented to the principals about what their feedback was, and we have a probably 15-page report on areas that we are doing well and areas to focus on. So when I look at that report, I really saw 3 big buckets. The report gave us information on how effective are our curriculum resources and at each level. Which ones are working well and which ones do we need to take a closer look at. The second bucket I saw are instructional practices. So what practices are we using with students that are effective, and what practices are maybe being used less that would help grow our students in math. And the third bucket is professional development. What's their recommendation for professional development? So from those 3 buckets that after analyzing that report, been working with Chris to make a 3-year plan. So what do we need to do in year 1 to really target those areas from the audit that we need to improve upon in the district in math? And I say 3 years because there's a lot of information in there. And we want to identify what are the most critical things in year 1 and then build on that. If we tried to do it all, we would probably continue to burn teachers out. So what's manageable in year 1, 2, and 3? But we want to know where we want to be and how are we going to get there. So building that roadmap. So that has been really valuable information. And so next year, our focus is really going to be on professional development in math. We know that this can be very effective. We just saw what happened when we had teachers with 60 hours of professional development in reading and what our reading data is looking like. So we're going to go with that, you want to continue to do what's working, and so we will be looking at that similar types of professional development in math next year. And another area that I didn't put on here that we're exploring, you're familiar with Reading Core. They have a math core, and specifically one for middle school. So, yes. So, I just had a meeting today, been meeting with Superintendent Holtzman about it as well. So, if we have to, we can't serve the entire district in math core, but if we look at our data, what would be the best area to focus math core? It would be middle school, where we're getting tutoring. So that is our goal, to keep exploring that and hopefully be able to move it forward, plus the return on our investment with what Reading Core has shown us. We hope to see that same in math. So been meeting with the middle school principals, while Chris has been out on that as well, to keep that moving forward. So that was a lot of information, but you can see, we're being transparent. Here are our strengths. We definitely have areas to keep growing, and we know that, and we're working on ways to address that. So I'll take a minute if you have any questions or feedback or thoughts.
Great presentation. Thank you for being transparent. This is all great information, and I love it when you can then translate the data that you've captured and provide next steps and create those plans. It is interesting that 7th grade was both low in math and reading, so I was really happy to hear that you have action steps, and if we can get math to be able to do that, that'd be great. I'm going to ask a question, but probably already know the answer to it. When you're developing that 3-year plan on what that looks like for math, and since it's a priority, I'll look at Superintendent Holzman, that rolls up into providing resources for that and working with Dan to make sure that resources are provided for that. Because even though you have a great plan, if you don't have resources behind it, then it's really for naught. So just making a comment, Mr. McCray, if you're listening.
Yes, and those
sure
are
he's gonna love that.
Superintendent Holtzman can share with you, those are the exact conversations we're having.
Okay.
So when we think about, staffing and what does that mean, and when we have to prioritize things, we know what our data is telling us where we should prioritize. So those are conversations we're having.
I'm envisioning a future PPC committee meeting where we have another math cohort, and maybe the Forward Foundation can help support an initiative with best practices for math, like they did for reading and doing best practices. But in the iReady, you said that was nationwide, and so you had national data to compare us to along with the state. Is Mastery Prep not nationwide to be able to have that same data?
It is national, so, yes, I don't know. It depends on how schools use it too. We use it fall and winter. We've even talked about adding a spring, but at this point it's been fall and winter. So not all districts use it in that way.
Okay.
They might only use it one time a year, but it's a question I could further explore too, or maybe.
I just really
Mark
liked having
yeah.
the district, the state, and the national for the iReady. That was really eye-opening.
Yeah.
Because it made me realize that when you look at the data for 7th grade, we're not alone. Like,
Right.
that's a low national. So like,
Correct.
what's happening with 7th graders emotionally,
Nationally.
physically,
Right.
nationally? Like, it wasn't like, oh.
It
our
helps bring context to that percentage, because it sounds even low when we say it, but then.
It does, because it's so helpful that iReady consultants or staff members came, because hopefully they gave some information as to what's happening nationally in that grade
Yes.
level that we're also seeing. So it made me feel like we weren't alone.
So if you recall, historically, the ACT was not required by all students. So then moving forward, because it's part of the Wisconsin, our own report card, now every student in Wisconsin takes it. So the reason why you can't always compare it nationally is because the iReady in some districts are only given to those students who are planning on taking the ACT, which if we had students who were only planning on going to college or university, the scores would look different than if you involve everybody. So I think that's the general reason why this iReady isn't, or iReady,
Master
Master
Prep.
Prep, I'm
Master
sorry,
Prep.
is not universal nationally, because who takes the assessment by state is a little
Varies.
bit different.
Okay.
And, yeah, and I don't know, we would have to find out for sure. I know more districts in Wisconsin are starting to use Mastery Prep, but it's something that Chris had worked closely with and started because we were just needing an assessment in high school because everything was K-8. So they very much appreciated to have a tool that helps give them a better idea of how we're moving forward in our progress, so towards goals.
Thank you.
I want to share, so I have a fifth grade student in my life, in my family, and at conferences, I got to see, obviously, her iReady score. And I want to share with all of you that as a parent, there's really good information on that sheet, much more. It's much easier to interpret than the STAR reports were. I remember, in the past, like I would look things up, like I would Google things from the STAR report because they just didn't really explain as much. But I think as a parent, we're getting really good information about, and like the individual tests, not just reading, but what things were looked at, and if your student wasn't assessed, why weren't they assessed? And so I just think it's very valuable. I found it very valuable. I also can note that the students that I have in the district who they take iReady and they, have like a goal that they set for themselves. Mom, I'm taking the iReady reading today and my goal is this. And those scores are automatic, and so then they know if they met their goal. But both of my kids had goals and they were excited to tell me, what their new score was. Did they reach their goal or, whatever. So I think that's very valuable for us to know too, and how our students are approaching these tests. And I think that's really exciting to see.
And I'm glad you brought that up. That was something we did as a district too, to say we're all gonna have conferences and set a goal with our students. They need to know where they're at and where they need to be. And even if they don't quite make their goal, because they have what they call a target or a stretch growth goal, so they have two goals. So they talk to them about that. But it's also, if they don't quite meet that, there's still celebrations within that data. Like maybe I did better in geometry than I did in algebraic reasoning, but I can celebrate and then say, hey, here's where you're gonna look to grow next time. So that goal setting has been something that we have sometimes done in some buildings, but this year we said we're all doing it in all buildings.
I think it's fantastic.
So,
And then also, I think it's a good reminder for us to reflect on, so like the fifth grade cohort, those students have had bridges all of their years of education. That means that sixth grade, seventh grade, and eighth grade did not. And so their part of their education was learning a different curriculum that we found to not be as effective. So it's important for us when we're thinking about why some of those scores are where they are, it's because there probably were, in terms of, what they're being tested on, weren't aligned, and you can't just make that up in like a year or two. The other thing is, you think about how old some of those students were, and sixth grade, seventh grade, eighth grade, they were in first grade or second grade or third grade when COVID hit. Maybe first grade or second grade, kindergarten, first, second. Those are really fundamental years. And, we all know that it wasn't just those few months, it continued, and there were challenges that continued for the, next year and a half or so. And so when we think about where they were developmentally and what they were learning, and some of our resources weren't aligned to the state's, testing, what those requirements were, it just paints a story for us to understand why maybe we're still seeing some of those challenges, because it was a whole lot going on for them. So, and then just from a personal note, when I love this mastery prep and how we've set it up for our students to be getting this test taking, they're learning what it's like. When I took the ACT and I was a Janesville Craig graduate, not everyone had to, and I signed up for it, and I just assumed that I was going to be taking the ACT in the J room at Craig, and I had my little ticket. Do you remember those tickets that you get? And I don't know, I didn't really look at it that closely because all my friends were going to the J room, and I showed up at Craig, and the person at the door said, "You're in the wrong test place." And I was like, where am I supposed to go? And I needed to go to UROC, and I didn't know how to get to UROC. And this is back in the 90s. And so there was not a cell phone, there wasn't a Google map thing to just get me there, and my family did not live close, and so I frantically drove to my best friend's house and pounded on the door and said, "How do I get to UROC?" And I raced. If you know where Craig is and you know where UROC is, they're not close. And I raced, and I found the furthest parking spot away, and I ran up to that, and I was the last student in, and I made it. But you just think about the anxiety. My score was not fantastic. I mean, I don't think you're probably any of you surprised to hear that, based on what I went through that day. I do question why my parents didn't look at that and make sure I was in the right spot. But I mean, that was a long time ago. But I think about how invaluable this is, that our students don't have to go through what I went through all those years ago, because it was not a positive experience. So this is great that they get to do it, and that they don't have to pay for it either. So
Sounds like a safety message for driving.
definitely.
This is great stuff. So you can drill down to this, like by school, classroom,
Teacher.
really, nice. So yes, Bridges, when's the last time we did middle school math curriculum?
So we did have a new adoption about 3 years ago,
What's the name of it? I can't.
EdGems.
Oh, okay.
So, but the math audit shared some maybe components of EdGems that we're not using,
Okay.
I guess, as effectively as we could be. So
Sure.
those are some parts of the curriculum that we know we need to dig a little deeper into, and how do we use that part of the curriculum
Nice.
more frequently, so.
The last thing I was gonna say is, I like I don't know if other schools are doing it, but Craig at least does emails. Your student has gone, whatever, the attendance, related to
yes.
attendance, so I like that parents then know, like, we know the focus of the district, but not every parent does, so I'm just glad that, I like to see that addition this year. It seems to be new to me this year, but anyway, it's a good one.
Yes, and I think it was your attendance rate was related to being able to attend prom.
Oh,
as well.
exactly, yeah, they did.
So
You
they know
had to-
incentives.
Oh, yeah, I think even homecoming, I think
Yes,
you have to have a certain,
Mm-hmm.
which is good, yeah.
Different ways to get kids to think about their attendance. Yeah. so.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it. Okay, moving on. Staffing plan, Carrie Mickelson. Thank you.
I have an updated sheet for everyone. So this is my first year in going through the staffing, and there are so many meetings that we meet and talk about staffing that I think I joined the end of March, so all the meetings were done, and I was like, oh, staffing's not that hard. Staffing is very difficult. In my almost 30 years of being in HR, this has been the hardest staffing because it changes all the time. The enrollment numbers change. And we've got Mandy in enrollment now, and she's given us, weekly numbers that we've never had before. And so, it changes. I'll just put it that way. But our enrollment numbers for elementary, while they're slightly down, we think they're going to go up because of P4J and then our kindergarten. So those numbers probably won't be finalized until as we get closer to enrollment. We're projecting an increase in our middle schools, and then our high school numbers are kind of neutral, maybe down a little bit. Our charters will be neutral, but all those again will change as things change within our school districts or within our schools as it is. We have a lot less, so in February, we go through and we try to see if we can, we ask our people to give us their intention of whether they're gonna resign or whether they're looking to retire. So, we have currently 14 retirements, 8 in elementary and 6 in our secondary. Our resignations are 6 total. We do have 7 limited term, so those will automatically end at the end of those, of their limited term assignment. Some of those could potentially go to next year as well, but usually those are ended. And then currently, we had 1 non-renewal, and now, as of today, we don't have any non-renewals. We received a resignation for that as well. Our timeline stays the same. We have met with EL staffing to go over our EL numbers. We've gone through middle school and high school multiple times. We'll be meeting again in March with our elementary folks to finalize those numbers as well. So through March, we'll continue to have meetings to discuss that. I don't think we'll have any non-renewals for the March, so that will be our preliminary. We don't have to have those until May 15th. But right now, I don't think we'll have any for the next board meeting that we have. In April, it's kind of when everything starts happening. We will start posting things that we know where there'll be a vacancy in March. You'll see towards the end, and I'll kind of go through that, we've got some career fairs coming up that we've not attended in the past. So we're trying to get a different group of people to be interested in coming to the Janesville area. But in April, we'll submit our final numbers to the Board of Education to approve. Our directors will go through those numbers in March. Then we'll have our last board meeting. If we have any non-renewals at that time, we'll bring those to the Board of Education in our last meeting in April. And then in May, we'll have all of our administrative assistant, paraprofessional, all the clericals, have those submitted and go through those numbers with our teams. And then we'll also administer any non-renewals or anything that we have from there in May. So by May 15th, we send those contracts out, so we have to have everything in set and where we need to go. So what we're doing now is we are, when we're not in staffing meetings, we're attending some job fairs. We just had UW Whitewater a couple weeks ago. We had 8 leads that are interested in Janesville. I have a follow-up interview with a student who couldn't be at that one and asked if she could do a mock interview with me, and I said absolutely. She is part of one of our programs that we have, so I was really interested that she's interested in coming to Janesville. We have our CISA 2 career fair, so all the schools in the area, that's in Cambridge every year, and those that are graduating in May will come to that. It's pretty well attended, but we're fighting with all the local folks for the talent in the area for them to come into our group. We're going to UW Stevens Point this year. So UW Stevens Point has tech, agriculture, and our edu students. So looking at, I think it was the end of last year, I want to say in June, I remember we were in a meeting here and Mark was in there and we didn't have tech ed and we didn't have agriculture and we didn't have computer science and we didn't have business, and I went, uh-oh, we don't want to have that happen next year. So I reached out to all the schools that had that, and I've kept in contact with them throughout the year. They've sent me their job or their career fairs that they're having, so I'm attending all of those and meeting with those folks when I go there. So we're competing against probably 10 students in some of those schools, but I feel like I'm pretty influential, and I'm like, that is like game on. I think that I can, in convincing some of those 8 students in the state to come to Janesville. So that's my goal in attending these ones that are kind of a little bit different. And really what I told the team was, you know, if it doesn't work out, it doesn't, but we don't know until we go there and can get in front of some of these students. So then we're going to UW La Crosse. One of the 3 competing in the state is graduating. So I'm hoping to meet him. I've got a meeting set up for that to talk to him about Janesville. So, you know, my goal is to at least put it into his head that Janesville's an option for us in a growing tech department that we have. I've got UW Oshkosh, that's computer science and business. That is in April. And then we are attending the Parker High School has a career fair with all of our students. And we're going to try to encourage them to become educators in our school district as well. So while I don't have specific staffing numbers, I do have a lot of work that has been done and continues to be done. Does anyone have any questions on our staffing?
Just super quick, wasn't that job fair that we held here pretty successful and well-attended, and you're doing that again?
Yeah, so the job fairs that we had here were mostly successful for our non-certified staff. And so as we get closer to having a pretty good idea of what non-certified staff needs are for next September, we definitely will pull that back together, and that was internal.
Yep, we were just talking about it today, if we're gonna hold it at, last year, we, I think we hired like 3 or 4 people out of it, so it wasn't like we didn't have a ton of attendance, but the people who did come came prepared and were ready to be hired, so, but that is for our non-certified group, and then, right now, kind of as we sit, we are in the best for staffing that we've been positioned for a very long time. So we don't have a ton of vacancies, and we're doing pretty good. So we're going to go into the season a little bit better than we normally have.
When you have that date secured, if we could maybe have something for marketing that we as board members could share to help
Yep.
you maybe gain 3 or 4 extra on
Yep.
top of the 3 or 4 that you got last year.
Yeah, we were just
I'm pretty sure
talking-
we'd all be happy to share that on our social media to help get the word out of that career fair.
We were talking about it today because it's earlier this year. So because school is starting earlier, we want to make sure we're having it. So we'll probably look at like the end of July, somewhere in that time frame to have it. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I have one more question. UW-Madison has the program where they pay students to get their masters, and then if they agree to stay in the state for 3 years, is that correct?
That is correct.
Did they have a career fair or anything like that? Or-
I don't know. So if you don't reach out to the only reason I have all those is because I reached out to them, so they sent me all those dates. I forwarded them on. I thought of Madison for a hot second of whether or not we were going to attend anything or they hold anything. Career fairs are much different than they used to be even like 5 to 10 years ago. So COVID changed scores. COVID changed how we do job fairs. We used to do them like 2 days at a time. I mean, there'd be hundreds of employers there, and now it's 3 hours. And, you know, you're competing with, 100 graduates. It's much different than what it used to be, but we'll check on Madison to see what they have, because they do have good programs as well. Yep.
I think I just want to thank you for taking the time to reach out to those universities and start building those relationships, because even though you might attend Stevens Point, La Crosse, Oshkosh, the people that you've made contact there and you build that relationship, I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, But those, and having Janesville at the top of their mind and building that relationship with people that send you that career fair, your presence will be known far beyond probably what the career fair, that 3-hour time span is, because they'll be talking about Janesville because you've built that relationship with them. So thank you for doing that. I really do appreciate that.
Yeah, I want to reflect on that as well. I feel the same way, and I mean, certainly I would have appreciated being at one of these schools and then seeing my hometown there, you know. I have a student at UW La Crosse, and I am continually impressed with how many people, not just from Janesville, but from this particular region in Wisconsin that attend UW La Crosse. My daughter has met so many people from Madison, and I mean, she's a new friend from Parker, and they never interacted. And so my point is, at La Crosse, there could be a heck of a lot of people from this region that now other schools or other districts are marketing to. We don't want to lose out on them coming back here. And the other thing that I think about, you know, maybe a teacher may not be willing to move from Green Bay to Janesville if they're already established. But if you're just newly graduating, it might be very exciting to go and move to a new community and try something. And so those students might be much more willing to come to Janesville who are from a different part of Wisconsin. So I think this is great. Thank you for mapping everything out. I think it's really very beneficial for everyone to see all of the moving pieces that take place to create the staffing plan, because it is just, it's gigantic. And, you know, I think it just gives some great appreciation. And I'm so excited to know that our staffing numbers are so solid. That is really reassuring. Thank you. Thanks for this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I could just add real quick, one of the things that is always on the back of HR's mind and mine as well, you see we have a total of 27 known attrition. And if our number was 10%, like if we had 10% attrition, that would be 80. So generally, we're gonna be somewhere, like, so that's the idea. The challenge that HR has is, we might not have the job yet, but we will have the job. So making sure that we're doing our due diligence to get because if we find out in June that we need a tech teacher or a computer teacher, or, you know, some of these hard to fill spots,
any of the hard work.
and you haven't had the conversations with people before, you're just cold calling someone who doesn't already know. So it's really important, because we will have spaces. I mean, we'll have regular ed and special ed, we know that, but we can't wait until June and then go where we were last year, where because what ends up happening is two things. Either A, everyone's doing overloads, which not healthy, or B, we tell those students, you can't take the class,
Take the class, yeah.
because I don't have somebody to teach it. And we have not been in that space where we haven't said to take the class, but that's where we want to make sure we're just eyes straight open. And then the other thing that I would say is, as Allison talked to earlier, we know in general our district has a deficit of about $1 million for next year. And we're not trying to save all of those resources or reorganize all those resources from HR, so to speak, but we're trying to right size based on where our enrollment is, but also keeping in mind that what is most valuable. And sometimes we have to make difficult decisions about, you know what, we need a little more staff. And if someone said 7th grade math or something like that, you go, yeah, that probably makes sense, like we've got to do that. Now, I wouldn't use 7th grade math because they won't be 7th graders next year, right? But those are the strategies and conversations that our team is having all the time. And I hope that we'll have really good opportunity to share that information with you when we come up with our final staffing plans. And you'll see pull a little bit here and pushed a little bit there in order to make student outcomes our best.
But I appreciate that comment, because without this data, you wouldn't be able to prioritize maybe a seventh, I'll use the 7th grade math teacher. You wouldn't know to do that. So the data is driving some of your financial decisions as a district. So I'll say that again for the community, you're using data to reinforce your decisions on how you use your finances.
All right, everyone, this is wonderful presentation. Moving on, announcements and updates. So next week is the agenda setting meeting for the month of April, and we always, plan out for like a month or two as we're planning ahead. So if there's anything that pressing that you really want us to make sure that we get set in there, don't hesitate to reach out. There's always the agenda request form, but you can always talk with me too. And then our next meeting is the first Monday of April. What is the date of that? Does anyone know? The 6th, right here in the ESC 430. Thank you so much for being here. Our meeting's adjourned.